Good evening, DIVA community. And on this day that DIVA community has reached 12,000 members, 12,000, whoopee, in just over a year, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Sophie Ward. Hi, Sophie.
Hello, Linda. Lovely to see you. Hello, everybody.
Author of this wonderful book, Love and Other Thought Experiments. Also, we've got Nikki Cottington, who is the co-chair of DIVA Book Club. Hi, Nikki.
Hello. Hi, Linda. Hello, Sophie. Hello,
Hi,
everyone.
So we'll start. We've got some questions. As I said, Nikki is the chair of the book club. And they've been meeting all month discussing your book. So they have some questions for you. But before Nikki, I obviously have a few questions for you, Sophie. This was your debut novel, and it was actually a Booker nominee for your first novel. How did that feel?
It felt amazing. It's very life-changing. Obviously, I felt incredibly grateful and happy, but I also think it was a reflection of how they approached the Booker long list this year, which was to sort of open it out, and they were sort of looking for new things, new voices, I think, because there were a lot of debut novels on the list. And so I just felt really lucky that my book had been there at that time. So I feel, very, very lucky and very happy.
I think you might be being a bit modest there, Sophie. It's a really remarkable book. And after you finished talking with Nikki about it, I'm hoping some of the viewers will go out and buy it. Is it available on Amazon or for...
Yeah, it's available everywhere. I mean, I'm a big fan of Bookshop, which is it's a competitor to Amazon, I guess. I mean, Amazon, I won't pretend I don't use Amazon. There's lots of things I use Amazon for, but some of the funds go to independent bookshops if you order it from bookshop.org.
Okay, I did kind of know that. That's why I said, should we go to Amazon? And,
I'm not dissing Amazon. It definitely has its uses, but obviously there are lots of great bookshops. And this is the paperback cover. You've got actually a proof copy there, I think, Linda, that before it came out in hardback. So yeah.
So before, I know that I should probably be asking you this at the end, but I'm very curious. I mean, is it hard? Well, let me put it another way. Do you feel like a real big sense of expectation for your next book? And I'm assuming there is going to be a next book.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, there is going to be a next book. I'm just finishing work on it now. It comes out in March 2022 or May 2022. Yes, there's a lot of pressure, because when you write your first book, you sort of expect nobody will read it, and it won't. It will have its own little thing. But I wasn't expecting how many people found the book, which was amazing. But I also didn't realize how many book critics there are out there, and what a big world that is. As an actor, I was used to criticism and negative reviews, and I sort of got used to all kinds of reviews, but usually it's just a few newspapers. And so suddenly, because I mean, it's great about social media, but I didn't realize that Instagram, there was this huge world of book bloggers, and I had no idea. And so suddenly you get, and it's very direct feedback about books. So yes, there's a pressure there, but it's a good pressure, really, because it means that you can, you're going to really be careful about and considerate about what it is that you're writing, and keep on polishing.
Well, you mentioned there, Sophie, you're obviously very well known for being an actor. You did mention that. For those of you who haven't seen A Village Affair, a very it's got to be watched. I know that basically people always mention it to you, aren't they, Sophie? Especially in the lesbian world.
Yeah, well, it was a big. I mean, that's Joanna Trollope. That was from a book, and it was my life, which was a weird sort of overlap in my own life, which is it described so well what I was going through while I was making the film, which was a very strange experience for me. But it also meant a lot, and I think loads of people could understand what the story was about. You know, she's clever, Joanna Trollope. She understands about people, so she'd written something that was very truthful.
And was it hard? Was it a help or a hindrance going from being like a well-known actor to an author? Do you think that, was you worried people might not take you seriously as an author at first?
Yeah, sure, of course. I think somebody was talking about, I won't actually name it because it actually sounds like a diss of that person, but it was just a lot of reviews for somebody's book who had been in the public eye. And there's that sort of comparison. People don't know. Just because you are well known in one field, it doesn't mean you can do something else. So I could completely understand that cynicism and skepticism about it. But I was really lucky that the book press, I think the first reviews that came out were in the Telegraph and the Guardian, and they just took it for what it was, and took the book on its own merits. So I was lucky about that. So I mean, it does give you a bit of a platform. Because of the COVID, we got lots of book programs started on television, which was amazing. It was a sort of renaissance for book programs, and I guess that was a nice thing for me because I was already slightly well known as an actor, and then I could go on and talk about my book, and that was great. There aren't a lot of opportunities like that. I guess it has its ups and its downsides.
Yeah, no, I was just curious on that, but I will come back to you with some further questions. But without further ado, I'm going to move on to our DIVA Book Club co-chair, Nikki, who's been sitting there very patiently waiting to ask you some very interesting questions.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Sophie. So first of all, just want to say that the book group really enjoyed the book, and we got a lot from it and had a fantastic discussion last week when we got together. Lots to talk about in there. So first of all, just for those who may not have read the book, can you tell us what it's about?
Sure. I say that, but I never really got what they call the elevator pitch down, because it is, as you know, quite complex in terms of where it goes. But the basic central story is two women who are just starting out on the next part of their journey together. They love each other, but they haven't quite made the next step to commitment of what they're going to do now. Are they going to stay together? And they live together, but now they want to have a baby and maybe get married. And that's a bit more frightening for one of them, their character called Eliza, who's quite scientific. And Rachel's all kind of creative and emotional. And she definitely wants to have a baby, and she definitely wants to pursue the relationship. So they do that. They go ahead with that. But in the meantime, they've got this issue with, in their little apartment, there are these tiny ants. I don't know if you've seen them. Sometimes I think maybe I've made them up. But there are these tiny, tiny ants, right? And this tiny ant makes its way into their bedroom one night, and as far as Rachel is concerned, crawls into her eye and moves into her head. And she's been having headaches anyway, and now she feels that she can feel this ticking in her head, like the ant is living in there. And it causes a big discussion between her and her girlfriend, and a sort of test of their relationship. And then the rest of the novel is their journey, the baby that they make together, the ant, the baby growing up, and where that takes them.
I'm glad you spoke about the ant, because it's a really central part, isn't it? And we had a lot of discussion about the ant and what it represents. And there is an explanation in one way towards the end of the novel, isn't there? But also some people felt that, did it represent also Rachel's fears, preconceptions about having a child? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the ant was very real, and I didn't want the ant to just be symbolic. To me, it is a real thing, and then I was quite interested in this overlap between that world and the computer world and Rachel's brain. But ants are very symbolic. They're always used in literature, and even in the Bible as part of parables, and the hard-working ant that goes ahead and takes on the sort of weight of the world, but is part of a organization. If you're into Star Trek, then the sort of Borg-like existence, whereas humans are considered more individual. And I was quite interested in that interplay between what a creature that's used to always doing everything as a collective, and a person who's always used to doing everything as an individual, and how they might meet in some way. And also it's almost the smallest life that we get to observe with the human eye, that we can actually see them sort of marching along. I remember cartoons when I was a child of like Tom and Jerry, of them like picking up a picnic and, you know, taking the picnic off with them together and things. They're very vivid in our minds, I think. And obviously in Rachel's mind, more vivid than anywhere. But yes, what you were saying about her fears, I think definitely it brings to the fore this feeling of, you know, who she is and what her life is about.
Absolutely. And that overlap of the philosophical and then the factual, the real, I suppose, as well. And thinking about philosophy, so the title of the book is Love and Other Thought Experiments. And for people who haven't read it, each of the chapters has a thought experiment. Some of the best known thought experiments are used at the beginning of each chapter. And we had a lot of discussion about that in the book group as well. And certainly when I reread the book, I've paid more attention to the thought experiments, which was interesting. But we wondered what came first. Was it the thought experiments, or was it the kind of interconnected stories?
Well, that's a very lovely question, because it tells me that the story is working, because it doesn't just seem like it's surfacing the thought experiment. So thank you. That's very flattering that happened. And I'm really pleased, because the thought experiments were the things that first came to me. I'd taken myself back to school. I left school when I was young, and I then went back while I was working part-time. I went to the Open University, and then I did an MA, and then finally I was doing a PhD part-time while I was working. And it was this idea of thought experiments, which are these little stories that philosophers use to demonstrate certain ideas and theories. And sometimes they're only a few sentences. But I thought they were so fascinating, because they were often talking about quite scientific concepts, but they were basically just these crazy stories about zombies or people living on another planet. And I found it fascinating, as somebody who's always been quite interested in sci-fi and a bit of a nerd that way. And but that actually they really were stories, and I wanted to expand those stories. And then Rachel and Eliza came to me quite easily when I was writing the first story, but I didn't realize then that they could be the central couple through the whole book. And that was great when I realized that, yes, it could just all be about them, but from different points of view, but focusing on that central story.
Absolutely. And there are other characters as well that weave into the stories as well. And you mentioned there about science, and you've said about the philosophy as well. We felt that this book defied the usual genres. We weren't sure what it was. Was it a romance? Because there were some really romantic bits in it. Was it science fiction? Because there's certainly parts that go that way. Or was it a philosophical text? At some points we didn't even know whether it was truly a novel, or was it also educating us as well? Was it something philosophical? How would you define it?
Well, you and the book group and lot of publishers that were sent it were in agreement. Loads of people said, we don't understand what this is and we can't publish it. And even when I was writing it, my supervisor at Goldsmiths kept saying, it's sort of coming together, but who's going to read it? And I do understand. And so my expectations were really, really low. And I was lucky enough that my agent liked it, and she kept sending it out. But loads of publishers said, we just don't know what to do with it. We don't know how we'd market it, where it would go in the bookshop. And I hadn't thought of it. I let myself just write it and not try to define the genre of it. And I do think there is quite a nice thing happening in publishing at the moment where things aren't being so categorized. I mean, there would have been a time when it would have just gone in the gay section of the bookshop. And I remember when the brilliant Sarah Waters was first publishing, that she wasn't integrated into the main bookshop. Her books were going into the gay section, which, I don't get me wrong, I loved the gay section. It was great that there was a section where you knew you could go and there would be books for you. But the idea that meant that was just for LGBT people and not for everybody is kind of weird. And now you know, queer books are integrated into mainstream fiction. There are still fantasy and sci-fi and crime sections and everything, but Margaret Atwood is never in the sci-fi section. Not that I'm comparing myself to Margaret Atwood, but you know, she does this speculative fiction books. And there are loads of amazing science fiction writers and fantasy writers who are not considered that. Crime, again, I'm thinking of Kate Atkinson. I think Kate Atkinson's crime books would mostly be in the main section of the bookshop, not in the crime section. So there's blurred lines. I'm hoping that happens more, because as we know, all these stories are for all of us, and I think it helps if you're not just pushed into, you've got to be in this section. And I want to write books about everything.
I feel quite protective about the ants, Sophie. I have to just come in at this point and say, in the almost words of Stonewall, some ants are gay, get over it, you know. So.
I need that T-shirt.
Definitely, I think so. But you know, you mentioned about the publisher. For any like wannabe authors, you know, first-time authors that are watching, did you feel like a pressure to conform, or did you know in your head, you obviously knew the concept of the book? Were you just like, I'm doing this, and you know, we're going to make it work? And what advice would you give for others in your situation?
Well, I think very few authors can write something that isn't in their voice. You know, you find your voice, and that's what the stories that you want to tell. I don't think there are many good writers who can write to just because they want to be publishable or populist, or I mean, there are a few, but most of us are just trying to tell a story that we think is interesting. So I don't think it was a question of conforming. I just thought, well, only a few people will buy it, and that's fine. I was just so excited when a publisher decided that they could get behind it, and it would be they were going to take a gamble on it.
I'm really glad they did. I'm glad it was published.
Thank you.
And you said you kind of wrote, it sounds like you wrote it, it was what you wanted to write, what you needed to write. Did you write it with an audience in mind?
Well, I have my wife as my main audience, and when she felt things were going right, then that's a big thumbs up for me. She's a playwright, and yeah, so that's a good thing. But in terms of, no, I'm amazed. I mean, that's one of the things that's been so special about having the book out there. I'm just amazed at the amount of different people who have read the book and given me good feedback or spoken to me about it, and that it's reached out to them. That's been so special, that part of the publishing experience. because I love telling stories. I've been telling stories, you know, in a different way since I was very young, and the idea that I can do it in a more direct way is really refreshing.
Mm. And you spoke about it a little bit earlier, but how does the experience of the writing process compare to acting?
Well, it's even slower. I mean, people say that you know, if you're in a film, and sometimes people ask, you know, oh, when are we going to see that? And you're like, well, it'll be about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And it's going to take me 3 months to do it. And we only film 2 or 3 minutes a day. And the rest of the time we're waiting. And that seems like quite a slow process. But me writing, I know some people write and they've got an amazing like word count every day and everything. That is not me. I'm really, really slow. I spend a lot of time staring at the clouds and thinking. Linda, who is a friend, will know that I am away with the fairies a lot of the time. But I took about 5 years to write Love and Other Thought Experiments. And then even then, it's another couple of years before it's published. And the next book has taken me 5 years as well. They were overlapping a bit. But so it's very slow. But the advantage of that is that when you're filming, or even in a play, once you've done it, that's it. You that thing that the person saw in the audience or that is on film, you go home that night and you're sitting in the car going, why didn't I do that? And I'm not saying that doesn't happen with some things in a book, but for years you get to go back and say, oh, wait a minute. When that person meets that person, they should have brought that album with them and showed them it. And then they could have discussed it. And then 30 years later, they will have remembered the track that they played. And you can do that. Mm. And especially with this book and actually the next book, I have different timelines. And that's quite hard to keep in your head all the time. But it's great because you can then go back and correct the timeline or make sure that, you know, it makes sense. And actually it does. That person was that person's parent and they were born then. And so they're related that way and all that sort of thing. You've got a long time to make sure that all works. Well, I love
it. And do you think it's going to become a film, or what? Are there any plans? Or
I think a bit like the publishing, that it's a little bit difficult for people to quite visualize how it would work as a film. This book, I think I've got an idea, so I will go ahead probably and do my own adaptation of it. But I think it is, you know, well, it could go, there's lots of different ways of doing it, and people make amazing things, don't they? They visualize the most incredible universes. So I know it's possible.
I mean, I'm looking at the book, and you know, it's a concept that I've never read about before. So where does it come from? You know, it's very hard because you go into a bookshop, as you said before, there's genres, and you know, it was hard. Is it just something that you knew you wanted to write about? I mean,
well, I went where the story sort of took me, and where some of the ideas from the thought experiments were inspiring me. A lot of thought experiments are quite odd, and so they already give you the idea of a direction to go in, and so some of the chapters are sort of magic realism, and some of them are more sci-fi. So I just sort of followed the idea of the thought experiments, and I just kept saying to myself, don't be scared, because okay, so one of the chapters is from the point of view of an ant, and I thought, well, just write it. And I love doing that as an actor. I love inhabiting other worlds and being, so I just thought, well, what would this be like? And what would be the really interesting things for me? Poor little ant loses a leg.
It's really interesting to hear about that writing process, and also how long it took you, because in the book group we felt it was very tight in a way. There wasn't spare words or sentences. Everything had meaning, which meant you had to pay attention, but it did feel very, very tight. And we heard that Patrick Gale, who's another acclaimed author, said that he thought you'd been cooking it up for a while because it didn't read like a debut novel, and that's what we were really impressed with as well. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
have you heard that about it, that it doesn't sound like it doesn't read like a debut novel?
I had worked on it for a long time, so yes, I had heard that, but of course that doesn't guarantee that it wouldn't. I mean, you're right. I did work quite carefully to make sure that it was quite tight, and I'm interested in that. I don't want to be too challenging to a reader. I don't want to not be satisfying, and I want to pay things off, because I think you do have a contract with a reader. But I know as a reader myself, I want to make some of the leaps for my own self, for my own imagination. I don't want it to be spoon-fed. So I'm quite happy to have a think about what that might mean if I think it was worth it. And of course, then the onus is on you to make it worthwhile for the reader.
Definitely. And you've got some ideas about filming, but you've also recorded the audiobook, haven't you, of this, the audio version. What was that like?
Well, I always imagined that would be like my dream, because I do audiobooks for other people's books. And for years I was like, well, one day it's going to be my book, and then it comes to it. And I suddenly realized I wasn't looking forward to it at all. I was dreading it. And then the morning of going into the studio, I said to Renee, I'm not looking forward to this, and I don't understand why, because it's something I've always wanted to do. What's going wrong? And then I realized I was actually just scared. I was scared that I would read it in that other part of me that wasn't me reading my book, but the actor part of me, and find it wanting. And because the other critical part isn't just editing and writing, but the part as an actor might not like it. And so I think I was really nervous about it.
So was it like performing it?
It was like performing it, and that part of me as an actor that is often doing other people's work and going, oh no, hang on a minute, that bit doesn't make sense, or this character, their voice has changed, they're not consistent, and things like that. That's what there was that other part that I think maybe I was worried had been suspended for the writing of the book, and now was going to come to the fore and go, no, Sophie, that's not good enough. But actually, I'm not saying I didn't find mistakes, but I did get swept up in it, and I did eventually enjoy reading it. But I think what I did realize was I would be okay with somebody else reading it. That wouldn't be the end of the world at all, which before I thought I'd be very possessive about it, but now I'm like, no, it'd be quite relaxing.
And do a lot of people do audiobooks? Because it's not something that I particularly do. I mean, what kind of percentage?
You mean you don't listen to audiobooks?
I don't listen to audiobooks. So
it's incredible. I mean, I started doing audiobooks about 30 years ago, and at that time it was unabridged books, and a lot of the work that was being done was for blind people. And then they started to do more. They became more popular because of more mobile devices that you could play them on, everything from the Walkman or whatever. So they became more popular because you could get the cassettes. And then now with streaming, and another version of Amazon, which we don't need to publicize, they're so easy to access. And your local library, I'm just saying, you can get a subscription to your local library for free, and you can download all the books from your library from their audiobook system too, which I do quite a lot, although the really good ones are often booked. You have to put on a waiting list. But I love audiobooks because, well, you don't garden, do you, Linda? But what about when you're out walking? I know you do a lot of walking.
No, but I might start. I might start doing it in the car or something like that. But you know,
It's
but just
great.
listening to you, it's something that I might actually get into. That's why I was asking. Is it?
Yeah. Well, I really recommend that you listen to them, Nikki.
Yes, I do. Sometimes I drive, but also when I'm running, sometimes I've listened to books while I'm running, because that can be really, really good. And lots of people in the book group, some people in the book group, that's how they access books. They listen to them rather than reading them, for various reasons.
That's a better way. Yeah. It's such a booming industry, and I always think, well, that's it. It's saturated market, but it just grows and grows and grows. In fact, I had to build a little studio in my apartment during lockdown because we couldn't get to studios, and so to do other people's audiobooks, it's basically a cupboard with a lot of blankets. But yeah, and I learned how to edit, so I've got a new skill set. So basically my only skill set, and so it was really that was really interesting process. But yeah, I love audiobooks.
That sounds like an interesting process. So back to the philosophy. So we understand that you did a degree in philosophy and literature, and then you did your PhD, which was in the use of narrative in philosophy of the mind. Is that right?
Yes. But it was a creative writing PhD, but that was what my thesis was in. Yeah.
I see. Okay. So we found a quote where Jacques Derrida said that philosophy, it's a man's world, and that's what men do. And I suppose if you think about classic philosophers, like lots of historical figures, it seems to be quite male dominated. Did that occur to you when you've been exploring philosophy, and how do you feel about that?
It's so funny you should say that, Nikki, because I saw the Derrida film in Paris in like the early 2000s, and I remember him saying that, and I was so infuriated that I think that had something to do with me spending the next 20 years studying philosophy, because I work like that. I get irritated and then I think, right, I'll show you. So obviously I'm not really sure I've proved Derrida wrong, but I absolutely took that to heart. How funny you should say that, because I couldn't get it out of my head. And then I was like, why should that be? I mean, that's insane. But yes, of course, the Greek philosophers generally were men, or the women that had philosophy we don't know about them. That's how things happen to work a lot. But then more recently, there are lots of people who are doing good work uncovering great female philosophers in history, and that's fascinating. And then a lot of times you find that there were really great male philosophers who had a woman that they worked with. Often it was the Countess of so-and-so or something, but somebody who'd had access to an education. And it's the same with sciences, that was how it worked a lot, but the man took all the credit. Yeah. Anyway, you're so right. That is a very important and irritating remark of Derrida's, somebody who I previously was quite enamored of. But yes, it was sort of grist to mill, or the bit of grit in the oyster.
Oh, well, that's good. I guess it inspired you. Maybe it's related to privilege as well. I guess it's something that you have to be in a certain position to be able to pursue your philosophical desires.
Absolutely. And I mean, when I went back to school, I feel so lucky that there is these possibilities, because now you can work and study, and there is the ability to do that, and it's actually not as expensive as studying full time. And then if you're working, obviously that helps to pay for fees, and people work around, there's different ways of doing it. So I feel incredibly lucky to have had access to education that I didn't have as a younger person. That's been part of the last 50 years or something, has developed to the point where we can access these things again.
Linda, are there questions coming through from the audience at all, or any questions that you've got for Sophie?
Yeah, I was just saying to our tech people, I can't actually see any comments boxes, so I'm asking her to send them over to me. But here you go. There's some as if by magic.
Well done, tech people.
Yep. So I don't know who this is from, but somebody is saying that they're really looking forward to reading this. They haven't had a chance yet because they've been a bit burrowed away writing their own book, but it sounds so interesting. So that's really good. That's something I have to say, you must read. And I hope we haven't given too many spoilers today. And then we go, a lot of comments are coming in, I believe, on the audiobooks. And that is actually exactly what I was thinking, actually, from Sarah Frame. Audiobooks are great, and I prefer if the author narrates it themselves. And I actually agree, because I was thinking that when you were saying you were narrating other books, and not to say that I wouldn't love to hear your voice every time I hear an audiobook.
I know, don't you actors out of a job?
I know I always get it wrong with you, but there is something really nice about you just feel that the feeling would be I'm gonna really dig myself a hole, so I'm not gonna go there.
No, I totally understand. I think especially non-fiction books, it's really nice to hear the author. But well, I mean, we've all got actors that we like to listen to too, so I think there's a good balance out there.
Okay, and there's somebody said
I've heard of this book. It looks. I'm gonna look out for it. That's a great tip. Thank you. I don't know who that's from.
What is it? I don't know what it is actually.
About women, the sort of women philosophers who've been overlooked historically, but who are now being rediscovered.
This is a great question, and I know you can read it, Sophie, but let me, I almost wish I'd asked it, so I'm going to pretend that I'm asking it, but it's from Sarah Frame. God, this is great. Sophie, the book is admittedly quite complex. Do you feel you are? Or would your friends and family think that you are a complex character too? I love this question. I'm not
yeah, that's tricky. I mean, probably yes, but then isn't everybody complex? I don't know any simple people. I mean, I think some people might seem to be more straightforward than others, but maybe that's the way we decide they are rather than who they really are. Everybody's inner mental life, I think, is quite complex, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to say though, Sophie, you are a maestro of getting out of the actual question. So what's this one? Oh, we're getting lots in. Some people don't really get the end. Oh, there's a spoiler alert.
That is a major spoiler alert.
Yeah,
but I don't think my feeling about humans, that the thing I wanted to communicate, which I was sort of discovering myself as I wrote the book, was about how we are not computers, and our bodies are important, but actually that there is something else about us that is, in fact, there's something about this every day. But I was just reading about this today, about not being compared to a computer. That our minds are something else, and there's some people call that the soul or consciousness, and there's a big debate about. So as long as that carries on, then we're not extinct. I suppose you might think we were extinct in the sense that we understand it, but then that changes all the time. Anyway, that is an evolution, I think. I don't know. It's a bit like how, they say when you lose someone, they're not actually gone as long as they're remembered. And I guess maybe that's part of what I'm saying, is what's interesting about us is the way that we connect, and what we care about, and the things we share. That's the most interesting part of being a person.
You obviously, I'm assuming that you are. I'm saying you must be doing a lot of Zoom talks about the book. How do people feel, when about spoilers and about how much of the book can you reveal when you're talking about it without stopping somebody going off to buy it, do you think?
Well, I don't know, because I haven't obviously read it through without knowing the end. But I think it's spoilers in this book is not really part of. You have to tell me. What do you think, Nikki? It's not really part of this issue, is it?
No, I don't think so. I think you could kind of describe the story and know about the story and still get quite a lot from the book. As I said, so I read it twice and got different things from it the second time. And when we discussed it as a group, people took different things from the book and focused on different elements. So there's multiple narratives anyway, aren't there? There's there's not just one ending. Does that make sense?
Exactly. And that's what I hope that people will take what's important to them, what they find interesting about it from the book. Yeah.
So there's a question just coming in that I'm going to read from my phone. From Lou Nichols. Is your new book going to be along similar lines with regards to philosophy, or are you trying out something different?
Oh, yeah. There we go. Yes. No, it's very different in terms of the obvious philosophical influences, which are so clearly laid out in this book. And a bit like you were saying, Nikki, with this book, I wasn't even sure I'd put the thought experiments in at the beginning. When I first was looking, when I'd first finished the book, I thought I won't put those in, and then I thought, no, I will, because people will. I do this when I'm reading. If there's a quote at the beginning of a chapter or at the beginning of the book, sometimes I read it and sometimes I don't. Sometimes it means something to me and sometimes it doesn't. So I thought, well, I'll put them in, just short little extracts, and then people will. In my next book, I don't have anything like that. It's not philosophical like that. It is about life. It's got two time frames. It's a girl from the 70s who grows up, has quite a traumatic childhood, and then 15 years later, those things catch up with her, and then there's another. So those are the two timelines, and there's another narrative strand as well about two girls who have gone missing, and they overlap.
Sounds very intriguing. Linda, can I ask one more question? Is that okay? Have we got time for that?
Yeah, we've got time. Have you?
Right. So we've got another question. You're known also, Sophie, as well as the acting and obviously a writer. You're known for your campaigning particularly around equal marriage, and published a marriage proposal back in 2014, I think. One of the things that the book group really enjoyed was around the depiction of queer relationships and queer family life. And like you said, even though it doesn't have to be restricted to the LGBTQ section now in a bookshop or a library, was that important to you to show those lives?
Well, I was writing about families that I know, and so it just came naturally to me to write about those families and those people. But what was quite interesting when I was first starting out and just reading little segments of what I was writing to other people was that in a more straight environment that were the groups that I was sharing my work with, there'd be quite a lot of sort of consternation about what I was talking about. And I was really surprised how many people would say, oh, you're reinventing families, or you're trying to leave men out of families or something. And it was quite surprising to me. I guess, obviously, we're all in our little echo chambers, aren't we? But so obviously then I felt, oh no, this is really important. I've got to do it more and put more in about this, because people don't know enough about it. So yeah, that was again another thing that made me think, right, stick to your guns and make sure that this is the one of the main things in the book.
Yeah. And I think that was really important to us when we, you know, as the DIVA Book Group, when we read it. I think it strikes you how rare it is to read in a novel that's mainstream, obviously longlisted for the Booker Prize, etc., really acclaimed. To read those, what reflects perhaps our own experiences and our own families, and how that works, and that's great.
That crazy that's still slightly unusual.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple of things I just want to sort of to ask Sophie is that your career is very varied. You've been a dancer in Avalon.
That was a very long time ago.
One of my favourite video Roxy music. Everybody should watch it. Sorry, Sophie. You're obviously an A-list actor, and I say actor because that's how you describe yourself, I believe.
It goes well with writer, doesn't it? Because I don't know any writresses, but I do embrace the old-fashioned idea of actress as being basically, well, not a prostitute, but, you know, women weren't allowed to be on the stage for ages, and then when they were, they had their sort of male patrons in the audience and things, and I do embrace that history. That is definitely part of being an actress, but I think it's just, you know, I think we're actors now, aren't we, really?
Yeah, well, I'm going with your lead, just in case anyone's questioning why I'm calling you an actor. And so you've been in, you know, mainstream movies such as Young Sherlock and many, many more. But did you envisage yourself? Did you always want to be an author too, or did that come later on?
I always wrote. I didn't think that it was going to be possible necessarily. Whose tail is that? It's magnificent.
Apologies.
Dog.
No, it's one of the 4 cats.
Oh my goodness! Look at that. It's hypnotic. I never.
I thought it was a snake.
I know, it is like that. I never thought it would be possible to necessarily be a published author, but I just definitely wanted to keep writing. And then I slowly, you know, when I went back to school, sort of started to practice more and get my hopes up a bit. And
then look what happened. I mean, did you ever imagine it would be such a hit, the book, though?
No.
That's a resounding no, then.
That's a resounding no. Oh, you've gone.
Linda, you're muted.
What advice would you actually give then to somebody like I'm one of the people watching, one of the 12,000 is it? DIVA community, and I want to say to you, I want to not only write a book, but I want to be nominated for a Booker Prize on my film. How do I do that?
I really can't emphasize enough how much luck is involved in that specific thing. But in terms of writing, that isn't luck, is it? That's having the confidence. I think we wrestle with ourselves more than we wrestle with anybody else who's going to be reading. The confidence every day to keep on writing is really hard, because your inner voice is always saying it's not good enough. You go into a bookshop, you see the amount of books that are just in that bookshop that day, and it's completely overwhelming. And you think of all the amazing books you've read, and you think, my book is never going to be as good as that. So what's the point? And I completely understand that, but it's just as though your next door neighbor asks you how you are that day, and you tell them. That's really important, and that your neighbor wanted to hear that, and you wanted to tell them. And that's what your writing is. You're telling people what it is you have to say, and it may not get published, but it definitely isn't going to be published if you don't write it. And somebody might read it who that's important to, that they saw that you said that, and you had those things to say. It's your voice. And I really believe that everybody should wrestle that inner critic to the ground every day and write what they want to write.
But But you have a publishing deal. If you didn't have the publishing deal, would you, because I know many people are doing this, would you have self-published, do you think, or would you have gone another route?
I don't know what the next stage would have been, but I mean, it did take a long time to find a publisher, and then luckily my publishers have wanted to stay with me. I definitely know that having a publisher and having a sort of deadline encourages me to write and keeps me going, and otherwise I'd be even slower. But I've always tried to find ways, like doing the PhD was sort of a way of making me, you know, I had to turn in work, so I had to keep doing it. And there are different ways of sort of tricking ourselves into finishing projects. And I can't emphasize enough how much better it is when you finished a draft and then you can go back and work on that draft. Because when you've not finished it, it seems so unwieldy. But when you finished it and just let it sit for a bit, you've got something you can work on.
Okay, so we are with DIVA Book Club today. We've got over 100 people in the book club who've put in some fantastic and interesting questions, much better than little old me can come up with. So thank you very much. We're going to put hopefully in the box out there an invitation for you to join the book club if you want to join. Nikki, do you have a final question for Sophie, and make it really difficult, please?
Okay, I'll try. So we'd like to know, what do you like to read?
Oh, you can imagine it's quite eclectic. There's all kinds of different things. I love sci-fi. I love Kazuo Ishiguro, so he just wrote Clara and the Sun, which was a beautiful book. And he wrote Remains of the Day, and I think, and I'm just trying to think what else I've got. The funny thing that happens, which I didn't know about before when you've written a book, is that people send you lots of books to read, which is lovely, but also quite pressurizing, because obviously you want to do them justice and read them and give them some nice feedback. So my TBR pile is quite high at the moment. I'm just about to read Cunning Women by, I'm just trying to think because her publishing name is slightly different. I think it's Elizabeth Lee. And that's a witch book that is coming out, or has already just come out in hardback. And yeah, I love Kate Atkinson. I think she's wonderful. Yeah. And Murakami, I really like the Wind Up Bird Chronicles, and there's so many amazing books, aren't there?
Thank you. Thank
you, Nikki. Thank you so much. And also to the DIVA Book Club, thank you so much. You know, readers are amazing, and the things that we get to communicate with each other through the books that we read, I think, is so powerful.
Thanks, Sophie. I just want to thank you and Renee for being such great role models to the community. You came out and gave so many of us, you know, it was a beacon, because there were so few out lesbians, I'm going to say, as it was Lesbian Visibility. So just to thank you for all you do, and you continue to do for the community.
Thank you, Linda. Feelings mutual. Bye, everybody.